Well, everybody, I am Drew Duncan. Do not forget that Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. Additionally, you can find me on YouTube and Patreon by looking for Drew Duncan Radio, and I am wherever you are listening to podcasts. Simply tell your device to play Drew Duncan on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I am wherever you're listening. The Kansas City Chiefs, they just may have comebacks of the century, right? 3 times down by double digits, and they are able to eventually win the Super Bowl in that fashion. Look, I will be the first to admit that I was rooting for the Chiefs, but I had predicted the 49ers would win. And I had said a few days, matter of fact, I had said in my too early Super Bowl preview that if they got down by double digits to Frisco, that there was no way they were going to be able to pull this one out. And especially when they did it late in that football game. I mean, come on, what was there, 7 minutes left? I mean, you had a good 10 minutes left, and Frisco had that interception in the fourth quarter, and they were in Chiefs territory, and they couldn't make something out of that. So you have to give credit to Kansas City. I know a lot of people are frustrated by the play calling from Kyle Shanahan, whose teams can't seem to hold on to leads in the Super Bowl, right? I'm sure everybody remembers the 28-3 Atlanta debacle. But I think that this was a different situation. I know you want to see your team run the football more, but I got to tell you, after a while, I think Kansas City was kind of ready for the run, and I think that there was only so much that Frisco could do in terms of running the football. And I thought maybe a shorter passing game would have worked. I thought maybe they were calling plays where they were trying to go a little too deep sometimes. But, you know, regardless of that, there are a few people that we always get, right, that are, you know, hey, man, the refs, the officiating. And look, for the most part, I thought the refs let the teams play. There were a couple of calls that surprised me. And I think for a good majority of us, one of those calls is definitely at the end of the first half, that play by Kittle where they called offensive pass interference. I just didn't see that. Yeah, I just saw 2 guys going after the football. Kittle's able to come down with it. I just really didn't see offensive pass interference, especially it being in the Super Bowl. It's kind of like, come on, bro. Yeah, let that thing go. You know what I mean? So I don't really understand necessarily what the officials saw in that situation. I think it's one of those let it go, especially when you look at later on in the football game, right? There was that 4th down play, and, I mean, the play clock had expired, and they went ahead and let Frisco follow through with the play anyway. So for me, when I look at that versus another situation, I think to myself, okay, we're letting one thing go that to me is a little bit more egregious, you know, but really outside of that, I can't really say I had a problem with officiating. You know, I know that a lot of Frisco fans are upset about that defensive pass interference. I'm 50-50 on it. You know, he does make a play on the ball, but he's not looking back. So, you know, by definition, unfortunately, it is pass interference. Now, this is 1998. I mean, it's just, it's definitely not called, but, you know, it's 2020, man. So, regardless, look, when all is said and done, you know, because I just wondered to myself last night, did the better team win? And that's the thing, right? Maybe it's a bias because I'm obsessed with the run game. I'm obsessed with defense. And I think that those factors generally make or break good football teams and great football teams. One thing I did say was Kansas City was going to have to find the short game. And there were a lot of people that were saying, well, they couldn't find those explosive plays and making it seem like it was a negative. But I thought it was definitely a positive. It's not that they weren't scoring points, and it's not that they weren't moving the football. You know, in this game, you are going to have to be patient playing against that San Francisco defense. And I think that Kansas City's patience and persistence and all those kinds of things eventually paid off. I mean, they were able to find some running game, right? Damian Williams, he did it all running and throwing or catching the football. So I think that paid off when all was said and done. Kind of play Frisco's game with them a little bit. Let this thing materialize. And they were patient. I mean, you got to give it to Andy Reid and those guys. I mean, it just something about it, right? Something about it just never quite seemed like the game was actually over, right? Even when Frisco took that lead, they had the interception. They're down in Chiefs territory. You're watching that game, and I think deep down, we're all saying to ourselves, this one's not quite over yet, especially when they couldn't make something out of that. So, I don't know that the better team won. I think the better coach won. I think the better overall game plan probably won. Because Mahomes and company, again, one of the things that I talked about throughout the season with this football team was the inconsistency. For a quarter, they'll look really phenomenal. And for the rest of the football game, they'll kind of look mediocre. And we saw a big part of that last night, right? I mean, come on, Mahomes threw 2 interceptions in that football game. And generally, when you lose the turnover battle, when you don't perform well on third down, those are things that eventually bite you in the ass and you're not able to come away with wins, especially in big game situations like obviously the biggest game in the U.S., the Super Bowl. So it just kind of makes you look at that and go, it was play calling, it was coaching, it was a lot of other things that ultimately led to the Chiefs winning that football game. It really was. And Mahomes is an ultimate factor. I mean, one of the things that people understand about this football team now, I think more so than ever, is that Mahomes really does make or break this team. I think a lot of people looked around talent-wise and decided, this Chiefs team is pretty stacked. You've got Tyreek Hill, you've got Sammy Watkins, who people said wasn't that good, but now all of a sudden when he's with Mahomes, all of a sudden he's one of the greatest wide receivers in the NFL, right? You got Travis Kelce, undeniable how great he is. And so people look at that roster and they go, bro, they're all really great. Well, I think we found out last night just how good Mahomes really is. And I wouldn't have been mad, though, if Damian Williams would have got the MVP of the Super Bowl, the scores and everything. But I guess for me, the bottom line, when I look at this Kansas City Chiefs team, if I had to give them a tagline for the season, right, I feel like it would be perseverance. Just kind of a John Elway mentality, kind of a Tim Tebow mentality. It's never over till it's over. We're never out of this football game. When you do what they did in the playoffs, being down by 10 points and able to win football games, I mean, that's a big deal, and I honestly thought it would catch up to them. It didn't. And you have to give hats off to this football team. I mean, they just refused to die. And that's a big part of what football is, man. I mean, it really is. People are talking about the Richard Sherman comments and all these other things going on when the very real reality of it is simply this. The Chiefs refused to lay down and be run over. And there were a lot of football teams out there that down 20-10, throwing an interception as late in that football game as they did, that would have ended the game. It really would have. But the Kansas City Chiefs showed you what they are really made of, and that is ice in their veins, made of steel, whatever you want to call it. They just refuse to lay down and die, and that is something I can definitely say that I am impressed with. Oh, and by the way, shout out to Pringle. I don't want to be a Bear because I'm a Grizzly. I, too, am a Butler grad, and great to see one of our own getting a Super Bowl ring. Guys, I am Drew Duncan. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. You can find me on YouTube and Patreon by looking for Drew Duncan Radio. And do not forget that I am wherever you are listening to podcasts. Simply tell your device to play Drew Duncan on Spreaker, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. I am wherever you are listening. And as always, don't you dare touch that dial.